My family decided to challenge the legality of my grandfather's will to pass the house to me. My name is Elliot Harper. I'm 28 years old and, in many ways, the outlier in my family. Not because I've done anything particularly rebellious, but because I tend to chart my own course, resisting the subtle pressures and expectations that often come from those closest to us. I've always been the quiet observer, the one who listens more than he speaks. This demeanor has led some to believe I'm easily swayed or lack conviction, but they often forget that silence doesn't equate to agreement. This trait likely contributed to the events that unfolded recently. It all began with my grandfather's house. He passed away a year ago after a prolonged illness. Even though we were aware of his declining health, his death still came as a profound loss. Grandpa was the kind of man who could light up a room with his stories, had an uncanny ability to fix just about anything, and made you feel like the most important person in the world when he spoke to you. He wasn't just a grandfather, he was a mentor, a friend, and the one person in the family who never made me feel lesser for being more reserved or not as outwardly successful as my siblings. His passing left a void that I wasn't sure how to fill. A few months after the funeral, I received a call from his attorney. To my astonishment, Grandpa had left his house to me, just me. Not to my parents, not to my sister, Marianne, who at 34 runs a series of minimalist lifestyle blogs, nor to my brother, Lucas, 31, who dabbles in various entrepreneurial ventures with mixed success. The house, the land, everything, it was all entrusted to me. This wasn't merely a sentimental gesture. The property was located in a rapidly developing neighborhood, with real estate developers expressing interest for years. Its value was substantial, nearing 7 figures. I was taken aback. Grandpa had mentioned wanting the house to remain in the family, expressing doubts about others' intentions regarding its future, but I never imagined he'd formalize this in his will. Still, I chose not to share this information immediately. Something told me to keep it close, like protecting a fragile flame in a gusty wind. Our family doesn't handle surprises well, especially when finances are involved. I meticulously reviewed the will, highlighting sections and rereading paragraphs multiple times. Grandpa had made his intentions clear and legally binding. I bequeath my residence, the entirety of the estate, and all its contents to my grandson, Elliot Harper. It is my wish that he maintains its integrity and ensures it is neither sold nor divided for personal gain. His handwriting, witnessed and notarized, left no room for ambiguity. About a week after I began moving some of my belongings into the house, I received a call. "Hey, Eli," Marianne's voice carried that overly sweet tone she adopts when she wants something. "Mom mentioned you've been staying at Grandpa's place. Is that a permanent thing now?" I confirmed, explaining that Grandpa had left the house to me. Silence. Then a light laugh. "Seriously? I thought Mom and Dad were still deciding what to do with it." "No, it's mine. It's specified in the will." More silence, followed by a curt "huh," and she hung up. The next day, I received a message from my mother requesting a family discussion. This phrase, reminiscent of childhood, usually signaled a group lecture rather than an open dialogue. I agreed, thinking it best to address matters directly. However, I wasn't prepared for the full-scale intervention that awaited me. They were all there, Mom, Dad, Marianne, Lucas, seated in the living room as if staging an intervention. Marianne stood as I entered. "Eli," she began with a practiced smile, "thanks for coming. We've been talking and wanted to clear the air." I sat, feeling a familiar tightness in my chest. "About the house," she continued. "It's a significant asset, and we thought it would be fair if everyone benefited from it." "Benefit?" I asked. Mom interjected, "Your grandfather would have wanted the whole family to be taken care of, Elliot. He was generous and wouldn't have wanted the house to just sit there while others struggle." "I'm not letting it sit unused," I replied. "I live there and am maintaining it." Marianne crossed her arms. "But we were thinking, maybe we sell it and split the proceeds. It could help Lucas with his ventures, assist me in expanding my business, and allow Mom and Dad to finally take that trip they've dreamed of. Everyone wins." Lucas nodded in agreement. "It's not like you need the whole house. You don't even use half the rooms." I looked at them, trying to process their perspective. "You know what the will states," I said. Dad sighed. "We just think you're being a bit selfish here, son." That's when I produced a copy of the will, anticipating this confrontation. I unfolded the document and laid it on the coffee table, the pages crisp with the weight of intent. "Then I guess you haven't read this part," I said quietly, pointing to the section titled Grantor's Final Wishes. The room fell silent. Marianne leaned in first, scanning it like she expected to find a typo that would undo it all. Lucas muttered something under his breath about manipulation. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue she always seemed to keep in her sleeve. My father simply frowned, his jaw set tight. They all read the same line, in my grandfather's own hand. It is my hope and instruction that the property not be sold, divided, or leveraged. It is meant to be preserved. My grandson Elliot Harper is to be the sole steward of this home and all that resides within. Still, Marianne wasn't deterred. This must have been written when he was already declining, she said, carefully avoiding the word she was thinking. He had all his faculties, I replied. He discussed this with his lawyer multiple times. It's witnessed. Notarized. It's valid. Josh scoffed. He was old, Eli. And you were the one always around near the end. Makes people wonder. There it was, the implication that I had somehow influenced a dying man to hand me everything. It stung more than I expected. But I held my ground. You weren't there, I said. When he needed help getting to appointments. When he wanted someone to sit with him and listen. You visited, what, twice in the last year? Meanwhile, I was mowing the lawn and changing the air filters. Dad stood up then, folding his arms. This isn't about what you did or didn't do. It's about keeping this family united. Your grandfather may have meant well, but you're allowing this house to tear us apart. No, I said, my voice firm. I'm not. You are, by not respecting his decision. The meeting ended there, with no resolution. Everyone left in a strange silence. Not the kind that comes after closure, but the kind that hangs like a fog between people who no longer see eye to eye. I didn't hear from any of them for nearly 2 weeks. And then the quiet started to feel too deliberate. No texts. No calls. Not even passive-aggressive Facebook quotes about selfishness or ungrateful people from Marianne. The silence wasn't peace, it was preparation. It began small. A few days later, I noticed some of my mail was missing. Not everything, just the important stuff. My bank statements never arrived. A package from a college friend in Minnesota was marked delivered, but never showed up. A utility bill I was expecting was inexplicably delayed. At first, I thought it was just a fluke. I went to the post office, asked if there were any delivery holds. Nothing. My address was correct. There were no flags or alerts on my file. Then came the neighbor. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was working in the dining room turned office, editing a set of marketing graphics, when there was a knock on the door. Not the polite kind. The firm kind. The kind that makes you pause before opening it. Standing outside was Mr. Weldon, a quiet man in his 60s who lived 3 houses down and had known Grandpa since the late 70s. Elliot, he said, rubbing his neck like he didn't want to be there. Mind if I speak with you for a moment? Of course, I said, stepping onto the porch. He lowered his voice. Your mother stopped by a few nights ago. She said she was checking on the house, wanted to make sure everything was in order. My chest tightened. She said that? He nodded. Mentioned something about the property being in transition, that the estate wasn't finalized. Made it sound like the house might still belong to the family. It doesn't, I said, trying to keep the emotion from my voice. Mr. Weldon hesitated. I know that. Your grandfather told me himself last year what he was planning. I just thought you ought to know she's giving a different impression. I thanked him. As soon as the door closed behind me, I locked it and leaned against it, staring into the quiet living room. My mother had started rewriting the narrative. That night, I installed a set of security cameras around the property. Front door. Side gate. Back alley. Garage entrance. 2 days later, the first alert came in, motion detected at 11:47 p.m. It was the side gate. I pulled up the feed and saw a figure in a dark hoodie crouched by the latch, using the light from a phone screen to examine the lock. Lucas. I watched in disbelief as he tugged, jiggled, and tried to lift the gate. After nearly a minute, he gave up, cursed loud enough for the mic to pick it up, and walked back down the sidewalk to a car parked a block away. I didn't react immediately. The next morning, I uploaded the footage and sent it in a group text. No caption. Just the link. No one replied. Not even Marianne. Later that afternoon, there was another knock. This time, it was my father. He didn't say hello. He didn't step inside. He stood on the porch with his arms folded. Elliot, this is getting out of control. I raised an eyebrow. You mean your son trying to break into my property? He was just trying to talk to you, he replied. At midnight? Over the side gate? Dad looked tired. You shut everyone out. You've made it clear you're not open to compromise. That's not true, I said. I've just chosen not to accept being manipulated. He sighed again, the kind of sigh parents give when they think you're too young to understand. Your grandfather wasn't thinking clearly at the end. He was confused. Tired. I felt something in me harden. Don't do that. Don't try to paint him as incompetent just because you didn't get what you wanted. Dad's expression changed, less disappointment, more frustration. You're making a mistake, Elliot. You're going to regret dividing this family. No, I said. That happened the moment you decided his last wishes didn't matter. And I closed the door. But I didn't sleep that night. I kept the lights off and watched the camera feeds, heart thudding in my chest as I wondered what they'd try next. Would they sneak in again? Would they file a challenge to the will? Then, a few days later, it came. A white envelope. No return address. No handwriting on the front. Inside was a single typed letter. Dear Elliot, we, as a family, have decided to dispute the legitimacy of your grandfather's will. We believe he was not of sound mind at the time of its signing and that the document does not reflect his true intentions. This letter serves as formal notice of our intent to pursue legal action unless a mutual resolution is reached. My hand shook as I read it. Not because I feared court, but because they were willing to go that far. They were going to drag Grandpa's name through the mud, claim he was confused, claim I had manipulated him. All to get their hands on something they believed they were entitled to. That was the moment I stopped playing defense. I wasn't just protecting a house anymore. I was protecting the truth. After reading the letter, I sat in Grandpa's old recliner, surrounded by the stillness of a house that had once been full of warmth and certainty. Now it felt like a fortress under siege. They weren't just questioning a will. They were questioning his mind, his choices, his legacy. And they were willing to lie, manipulate, and fight to take something they believed should have been shared, regardless of what he wanted. But they didn't know everything. Not yet. The next morning, I called Mr. Grantham, Grandpa's lawyer. He was in his early 70s, sharp-eyed, and spoke in slow, deliberate sentences. The kind of man who had built a reputation not on flair, but on discipline. His office still smelled like pipe tobacco and leather-bound law books. He greeted me with a slight nod and motioned for me to sit. I slid the letter across his desk. He read it silently, then set it down. They're bluffing, he said calmly, removing his glasses. At least partially. This is a pressure tactic, to scare you into a settlement. They're claiming he wasn't in his right mind. Grantham folded his hands. And I have hours of video footage of your grandfather, recorded over the last 6 months of his life. In each, he reads, signs, and discusses legal matters with absolute clarity. I blinked. He recorded himself? Grantham allowed a small smile. He called it his insurance policy. Said he knew how the family could be when money was involved. I sat back, letting that sink in. He even recorded personalized messages. One for each of them. Mary Ann. Lucas. Your parents. Said he wanted to leave no doubt as to why he left the property to you. It felt surreal. Like he was still watching, still protecting me even now. If they pursue legal action, Grantham continued, I will submit the footage along with medical affidavits confirming his mental clarity at the time of signing. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift in my chest, something like relief. But I also knew my family wouldn't give up just because the legal odds weren't in their favor. People like Mary Ann and Lucas didn't stop when the rules said so. They got creative. I thanked Grantham and left the office with a renewed sense of direction. But fate had another card to play. 2 days later, I got a phone call from someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 4 years. My great-aunt Lorraine. She lived in a quiet town in Ohio, rarely visited, and had long since distanced herself from family disputes. But she and Grandpa had always remained close. Her voice came through the line, soft but purposeful. Elliot, I've been meaning to call you. I heard from Mary Ann. She said, well, her version of things. I didn't interrupt. I didn't believe it, she said after a pause. Because I remember the last phone call I had with your grandfather. It was the day he signed the final version of the will. My heart skipped. He told me there'd be trouble. That not everyone would accept his decision. And he asked me to keep something safe. My hand tightened around the phone. What did he give you? A lockbox. Metal. Small. He told me to send it to you if the family started circling. Do you still have it? I mailed it this morning. 3 days later, a carefully wrapped package arrived. Inside, a solid, brushed steel lockbox with a folded note taped to the top. For Elliot. Use what you need. Don't be afraid to stand your ground. R. I opened it slowly, heart pounding. Inside were 5 items. A notarized letter reaffirming the will, signed and dated just 4 months before Grandpa passed. It reiterated his desire for me to be the sole inheritor of the house and included language that addressed each family member by name. An old cassette tape, labeled in sharp black ink. Play this if they try anything. Printed screenshots, text messages and email chains between Lucas and 2 individuals I didn't recognize. But I did recognize the content, discussions about how to liquidate the old place and bring in buyers as soon as he's gone. A handwritten list, dated over the past 2 years, detailing all the work Grandpa had asked me to do around the house. Fixing the roof, repainting the shutters, installing the new water heater. It was proof that I hadn't just inherited the house, I had cared for it. A sealed envelope, labeled in Grandpa's cursive. To be delivered to Grantham only, if legal action is taken. I stared at the contents, the breath caught in my throat. Every instinct told me this was bigger than a simple inheritance now. This was a defense plan, an entire blueprint Grandpa had left behind. He hadn't trusted the others. And now I understood why. I called Grantham again. We met the following morning. I laid out the lockbox contents on his desk. He reviewed each item with increasing interest, nodding occasionally, his eyes scanning each page like he was lining up chess pieces. When he finished, he looked up. "This is substantial," he said. "The cassette, have you listened to it?" I shook my head. He pulled out a player from an old cabinet drawer, inserted the tape, and pressed play. Grandpa's voice came through, warm and steady. "If you're listening to this, I'm guessing things went about how I expected. Elliot, if they try to take what I've left you, you hand this over to the court." I recorded a conversation with Lucas last fall. He was already talking about selling the house before I was even gone. The tape shifted slightly, and then another voice came on, Lucas's voice. "You know, we could really do something with this place. Marianne already has a guy lined up who might offer big money once it's yours." Grandpa chuckled. "I'm not gone yet. And don't count on Elliot going along with it. He's a lot stronger than you give him credit for." The tape clicked to a stop. Grantham leaned back, a rare smile tugging at the edge of his mouth. "They thought they were being clever," he said. "But your grandfather was 5 steps ahead. What do we do now?" I asked. "We don't wait," he replied. "We send a cease and desist. We make it known that we're ready to go to court, and we show them that we won't hesitate to expose everything." That afternoon, Grantham drafted the response. It included excerpts from the will, notice of the video and audio recordings, and copies of the texts. We delivered it by certified mail. The message was simple. Back down. Or we take this all the way. After the letter was sent, the silence returned. But this time, it was different. No threats. No texts. No social media drama. Just quiet. Like someone had finally realized the game wasn't going to play out the way they hoped. A week went by. Then 2. And that's when the unexpected began. Marianne's Facebook was suddenly gone. Lucas deleted nearly every post he'd ever made about unfair family situations and real estate investing. My parents? Not a word. Not a visit. Not even one of my mom's carefully worded text messages. For the first time since Grandpa passed, I felt like I could breathe again. But I didn't let my guard down. I knew people could go quiet not because they were finished, but because they were regrouping. Then one Thursday afternoon, just as the sun was beginning to cast long shadows across the living room rug, I got an idea. I invited them over. All of them. The same people who had stood in this house weeks ago, treating it like a business deal waiting to be cracked open. This time, I didn't invite them to fight. I invited them to listen. They arrived just after 4 p.m., my father first, quiet and unreadable. My mother next, hands folded, eyes darting like she wasn't sure she wanted to be there. Then Lucas and Marianne, arriving separately. Marianne still dressed like she was heading to a client meeting. Lucas in a t-shirt and loafers, his usual mismatched confidence on display. "Why did you ask us here?" Marianne asked as soon as she stepped into the hallway. "I thought we could clear the air," I said. But this time, with Grandpa present. They all froze. I motioned to the living room, where the laptop and a small speaker sat on the coffee table. "I think it's time you all heard what he had to say for yourselves." No one moved. So I pressed play. Grandpa's voice filled the room, as steady and strong as it had ever been. If you're hearing this, I've passed. And there's a good chance someone in this room doesn't like what I've decided. That's fine. You're entitled to your feelings. But don't pretend this is about justice or fairness. This is about who showed up. Who stayed. Who cared. I didn't leave the house to Elliot just because he's my grandson. I left it to him because he earned my trust. He kept the place going when I couldn't. He listened when others were too busy. I asked myself, who would protect this home, not just own it, and the answer was clear. He paused on the tape. Then he addressed them one by one. Marianne, you're brilliant. Driven. But you always look for the next best thing. You wouldn't have stayed in the house. You would have flipped it before the ink dried. Lucas, you've got charm, but no roots. No follow-through. You see value in numbers, not in places. And to my daughter and son-in-law, you raised a good boy. But I watched how quickly you let money influence your sense of family. This isn't about loyalty, it's about legacy. Mine. The tape ended. And the silence afterward was louder than anything I'd ever heard. I stood. No threats. No arguments. Just that. That's the truth. That's what he wanted. And if any of you still think I'm going to let that be dismantled, even now, you're wrong. I walked to the fireplace, the same one we used to decorate every winter, and stood beside it. I'm not angry, I said. But I'm done defending his wishes like they're up for debate. If you ever want to talk, like real family, I'm open. But if this house, this place, is still just a prize to you, don't come back. They didn't say anything. Marianne stood first. She looked like she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. She left quietly. Lucas followed, muttering something under his breath I didn't care to understand. My parents stayed a little longer. My mother stood by the mantel, touching the edge of a framed photo of Grandpa in his younger years, sitting on the porch with a newspaper and a dog at his feet. He really loved this place, she said softly. I nodded. He did. She looked at me, eyes glassy. You're not him. But, you're starting to remind me of him. Then she left. Dad followed a moment later, giving me a quiet nod before closing the door behind him. It could have ended there. But a few days later, I got a letter in the mail. From Lorraine. Inside was a note, written in her careful, slanted handwriting. I'm proud of you, Elliot. You did what many wouldn't. You honored someone's trust, even when it cost you peace. That's rare. I folded the letter and placed it in the top drawer of the desk in Grandpa's old study, my office now. The tomatoes in the backyard were still struggling. I watered them every morning, even though they wilted more often than not. But I was learning. The house was learning me, too. I had begun restoring little parts of it, repainting trim, sealing old floorboards, even framing some of Grandpa's handwritten notes I found in drawers. Things like grocery lists, sketches of a birdhouse he never built, a napkin that said, "Peace is a choice, not a condition." I wasn't sure where things would go from here. Maybe the family would reach out again one day with better intentions. Maybe they wouldn't. But either way, I had something they didn't. A clear conscience. I didn't win a battle. I honored a promise. And in a world full of noise, that's the kind of quiet I'm willing to fight for. Thank you for watching the video, like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.